Hello, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about Immanuel Kant and the Enlightenment. Before we get started, I would like to tell you a couple of things about the way we're going to have today's lesson. First, I'm going to go through a presentation, and during this presentation, I'm going to cover some of the main topics. First, I'm going to talk to you about main ideas from Enlightenment. Then, I'm going to talk to you about Immanuel Kant's historical framework. Then I'm going to talk to you about the Copernican revolution. I'm going to talk to you about what Immanuel Kant thinks about science. Then I'm going to talk to you about the critique that Immanuel Kant drives to metaphysics. After that, I'm going to present to you a couple of concepts such as phenomena and noumena. And then I'm going to talk to you about the sensitive intuitions of the a priori intuitions of sensibility. And after that, I'm going to talk to you about three kinds of judgment that Kant's proposing: the a priori knowledge, the synthetic knowledge, and the synthetic a priori knowledge. And after that, I'm going to talk about the categories of the understanding. And finally, I'm going to present the limitations that we've discovered so far about Kant's works. For this, we're going to be walking through a PowerPoint presentation, and we're going to be also making brief pauses so that you can go to my YouTube channel and check for some videos that may help you with the study of this topic. Okay, so hope this plan works for you. Remember, you can pause this video and go back and forward as many times as you need. And if you have questions during the video, please make sure to post them in the comments, or also you have my contact information, and you can uh, send me an email so that I can help you with understanding some particular topics. Okay, let's start with the presentation. Okay, so as I was telling you, today we're going to be talking about the Enlightenment as a new way of understanding the world. The first thing you should know is that during the Enlightenment there was this main motto that I think is the axis of all the development of enlightenment. This motto is dare to use your own reason. This was stated by Kant in his work What is Enlightenment? The main idea on what Kant wanted to do was to exhort us to use our own means to interpret reality. Try to think that Kant, with this, is going against all the prior definitions on what is knowledge. He was pretty aware of many philosophical currents before him, and he was going against all these institutions of knowledge, mainly what is religion, and mainly the universities and the places where you could get knowledge from. He would say that you should not just respect authority and follow what the authority is saying, but you should also question what authority is saying in order to see if what authority is demanding from you is actually right or not. This may seem quite similar to what we think nowadays. Nowadays, we tend to think that it is really important to be critical and to develop critical thinking. Well, precisely what Kant was doing back in those days was to aim for critical thinking. This critical thinking could allow us to develop better understanding of the world and to be able to question how science is working. Kant's ideas are framed during the Enlightenment. During the Enlightenment, what the thinkers are mainly trying to do is to find new ways to understand reality. The general movement provided during that was developed, the general intellectual movement that was developed during the Enlightenment was the encyclopedia. This was started by Voltaire and Diderot, and what they are trying to do is to provide a way to fight against traditional Christian thought. For instance, Diderot would say that the task of a good dictionary was to change the ordinary way of thought. So these dictionaries or these encyclopedias or knowledge, so to speak, that was being developed, its main idea was to provide a way for you to change the way you understand reality. If something was not changing the way, if some particular knowledge was not changing the way you would perceive reality, then this knowledge was not actually fulfilling its goal. So, philosophy in this case would have as a main task to change the way you think, to change the way you perceive reality, to change your ordinary thoughts and your system of beliefs. So, it's important for you to be aware of this idea, since it is mainly what Kant is going to be trying to do: provide a new way on how we can understand reality. Something as well for you to know that happened during this time is that during this time there was a switch in the way government was made, and they started developing this so-called enlightened monarchy. During the enlightened monarchy, the king, that was the ultimate authority for all knowledge and for all religion, is going to make a switch and in the way they are going to be presenting their way of government, and they're going to allow for freedom of speech and critiques, and they are going to create a parliament in order to be able to achieve a best way of government. For me, this is similar to Plato's conception in Republic about how to creating a wise government. The king over here would be someone that is really wise, that is really enlightened, as the illustration would say. Enlightened because he's really into developing knowledge as well, and it is enabling for the rest of the community to criticize and to exert their own ways of thought. So now I'm going to talk to you about Immanuel Kant. He was born in 1724 and died in 1804, died at 80 years, and died mainly of old age. He was an example of the simple life. He took care of health to overcome his fragile nature. He was really rigid in the way he lived, because he lived exactly as he thought. Meaning with this that when he thought, for instance, that people should be treated as ends in themselves and not as mere means in order to achieve an end, he would always follow this same pattern on the way he behaved. Also, the way the main things that he would propose in his theories of ideas, or in his critique of pure reason and his critique of practical reason and the critique of judgment, would be ideas that he would apply to his everyday life. Something for you to know also about his usual life is that he never got married, because he thought that he was mainly committed to knowledge. He never traveled outside Königsberg, that is the place where he was born, and his main works are the ones that I have already mentioned: The Critique of Pure Reason in 1781, Critique of Practical Reason in 1790, and Critique of Judgment in 1793. So now let's go for some ideas on what Immanuel Kant is stating. So let's. What I would like you to do now is please pause this video and go to this other video that you may find in my YouTube channel. That is Immanuel Kant, that is provided by Philosophy School of Philosophy. Okay, so please go watch the video now. Okay, I assume now that you have seen the video, and let's talk a little bit about what Immanuel Kant is, what this video is saying to us about Immanuel Kant. So first, what they are talking over here in this video is about the moral theory provided by Kant. As far as I would say, Kant has these main features on his ethical philosophy. He says that we should act as if we would like every one of our actions to become a universal law. What does this mean? That everything that I do in my ordinary life, I should be willing for everyone to do it for everyone. So if I accept a bribe today, let's suppose that you as students, one of you approaches to me and tells me that in order to get 100, you would give me 1,000 pesos. If I accept that, then I should be also okay with me bribing with those 1,000 pesos an officer, a police officer, to spare me a ticket. And then I should be okay as well with politicians being corrupt in public buildings. As you can see, this gets complicated, because when we talk about particular actions, it may seem that we may allow some, we may cut us some slack, so that we have some chance to do stuff that may seem at first that are better for us. However, when we try to think about this in a whole community, we may realize that my actions taken as a law for everyone may lead to bad conclusions. So what Immanuel Kant is saying over here is that we must think and act in the same way, and that our thoughts and actions must be correspondent to what the state is doing. What he would say in this case is that if we have a state or a city or a community or a nation, as you wish, that is providing good moral laws, and the individual is following, or the community state is providing moral laws, the community is following those moral laws, and the individual is following those moral laws as well, then we would be living in a better society. I think that this is actually a really good proposal. However difficult it may seem to follow in our ordinary life. He would say, for instance, that your desires and your will must be equal to those of the moral good for everyone that we should be thinking about. So I hope this can clear can clear some of the ideas. And if you have any questions on Kant's moral theory, make sure to contact me so that I can give you extra information. Um, as I told you, this is just a brief introduction to what Immanuel Kant is saying. But we're not going to be focusing right now on his ethical work. We could take a whole new video on Immanuel Kant's ethical work. We're going to focus today on his epistemological theory. So the first thing that I'm going to do now is to talk about the critique of pure reason. Okay, in the critique of pure reason, what Immanuel Kant is trying to do is to state a limit for understanding. He said, or he realized, that while trying to determine what we are able to know, metaphysics had gone too far, as, for instance, trying to determine what was the first origin of the world, or trying to determine what is freedom, or trying to determine if there was or not a soul in the human body. What Kant is saying is that some ideas as God, or the soul, or freedom, or origin of the world don't refer to reality. They cannot be verified in experience. And since these cannot be verified in experience, we should not be thinking about them. Because what happens over here is that knowledge may keep on going on its evolution, but it is lacking of solid foundations. So what he's going to do is that he's going to present a critique of pure reason, and this critique of pure reason is going to propound a limit for our understanding. This limit is the following: reason must focus in knowledge that is only related to experience. Meaning with this, if you cannot have a sensible experience of that particular that particular content of knowledge, then it is not something you should be thinking about. In this case, it is pretty similar to what empiricists are saying. Then he would say that we need to avoid metaphysical discussions. We need to avoid this kind of metaphysical discussions that lead to understanding if God exists or not exists, or if God is good or evil. He says these kind of metaphysical discussions lead precisely to nowhere, and had been something that is really, really bad for everyone in this world of knowledge. So with this, he's going to present a critique on reason. And this critique of reason is known as the court of reason. Imagine that what Kant is doing is becoming himself a judge in order to say what can be an experience or an object of thought, of philosophy, and what is not possible for the philosophy to be thinking about. So with this idea in mind, Kant presents a switch on the way he's going to perceive philosophy, and the way he's going to perceive the epistemological approximation to knowledge. And this switch is going to be named the Copernican Revolution. And he's taking this name of the Copernican Revolution following precisely this wide turn in the way we create knowledge presented by Copernicus. Remember, before Copernicus, we used to think, or humanity used to think, that the earth was static over here and the whole universe was revolving around it. After Copernicus, what humanity started thinking is that it is the Earth, the one that is constantly moving and rotating on its axis, and the whole universe is also making a different movement, so that the paradigm of knowledge is changing. What Kant is saying over here, when it's translated to the phenomenon of knowledge, is that he says before the Copernican revolution, the object, this object, let's imagine this particular object that I have over here, must be studied and discovered. So I should take a look at this and say, okay, look, it's made of plastic, it's made of the color black and the color white, and I should try to find what this is for. It is actually an iPhone case. So what he says is before the Copernican revolution, the object was there for me to discover it. But after the Copernican revolution, it is the subject, it is I, the one that is looking at this subject, that I must study myself in order to see which are the main conditions of knowledge that allow me to know that this is an object that can serve in one particular way. We're going to cover this in a couple of minutes. So if you have any questions, just write them down and keep them in your head so that we can see if they are solved in a couple of minutes. Okay, so just to be clear, so if you wanted to talk about the Copernican revolution, simply put, is in the Copernican revolution, there is a switch in the paradigm of the construction of knowledge. Before the Copernican revolution, the object was there and needed to be discovered by the subject. After the Copernican revolution, it is the subject, the one that is going to be wondering, what should I be doing with my life? Okay, and it is the subject, the one that is going to be questioning which are the main conditions that allow me to know the whole world. Okay, hope this is clarifying. Okay, so now for Kant, in order to have a science, in order to have scientific knowledge, scientific discoveries, in order to have, just to say, knowledge in a really wide sense, knowledge or science must have and must follow these four rules. First, it must have a specific object of study. So, for instance, if in metaphysics you cannot determine an object, a particular object of study, then it is not a science. Then he says there should be progress in its inquiries. So I should start in point A, and then I must move to point B, and then to point C, and then to point D. And I am going to suppose that point D is better than point A. If that is not happening, if progress is not happening, then it is not a science. What he says then is that this development must be continual. It's something that should happen um, constantly. It's not going to be stopped in any particular moment. It will always keep on moving. And then what he says is that this science must be able to get to some agreements regarding its subject of study. As you can see, this is quite related to the scientific method that we use nowadays. Every science that we know nowadays will follow at least these four steps, uh, adding some the other steps on the on the method followed precisely by science. So let's keep on going now with what Kant says. Now he's going to make a distinction on the things that we know and what we try to know. He says there are phenomena and there are noumena. Phenomena are those that we can perceive and we can analyze by our senses and reason. These are knowledge of this. The knowledge of this object is constantly changing. So a phenomena is something that appears to me, something that I can sense, that I can perceive, that I can analyze. So taking back this example that I was presenting to you, my Darth Vader, it is a phenomena that is right now presenting to all of you. It's presenting to all of you through this video. And you can perceive it by your eyes, and you can analyze it with your senses and your reason. And you may reason that it is made of plastic. You can reason that it may be suitable for an iPhone 6 or an iPhone 8, or you can think that it may be practical or impractical on the way you can use it. This is a phenomena that you can perceive and analyze through your senses. On the other hand, noumena is the essence of the object itself. It is outside of possible experience. So if we try to talk about this case, we've talked about this. The noumena of this case is something that I cannot know. The essence of the object itself is outside possible experience. So when I'm talking about phone cases, I should be talking about the I don't know, like you remember we were talking about the chairness of the chair. We should be talking over here about the casesness of this case. It's something that we cannot fully determine. That is the noumena. Okay, so it is what you can see and what you cannot see. That is the essence of the object. Okay. After that, after making that clarification, moving on what Kant is explaining in his Critique of Pure Reason, he says in the first stage of the Critique of Pure Reason in the Transcendental Aesthetics that there are two kinds of knowledge: those that are practical and those that are theoretical. Practical knowledge are rules that are applied to moral action and are those that we studied in the first video that we covered. And Kant is also going to present them later on in his critique of practical reason. And there are theoretical knowledges that are those that use deduction of notions, and this deduction leads to understanding that space and time are the main guarantee for knowledge. In his Transcendental Aesthetics, Kant would say that space and time are the main notions that allow knowledge to happen. So to make it with an example, try to think yourselves in something that you could know that it's outside space and outside time. I guess that is really difficult to think that there may be something that is outside in space and time. If it is outside space, if it's not within a space, then I cannot know it because it is not occupying any space, so it lacks of existence. And for me to know it, I need to know something in time. What Kant would say over here is that space and time are necessary conditions for knowledge to happen. Okay, space and time are for Kant the a priori intuition of sensibility. What I am going to experience by our senses, by my senses, it is necessary for them to happen within space and time. Okay, so following up on what Kant is going to say on his construction of knowledge, he says that there are three main ways for us to construct knowledge, three main judgments. So please now click again, pause on this video, and go to this video that you may find on my YouTube channel. That is Kant on Metaphysical Knowledge. Okay. Okay, again, I am going to assume that you have seen this video, and I'm going to cover now some of the content explained by our friend over there in the video. So what our friend is telling us in the video is that Kant is going to make a distinction between different kinds of knowledge. On one hand, we have the a priori knowledge, and the other hand, we have the a posteriori knowledge. He's going to say, a priori knowledge is that one that is universal, meaning that it will always happen regardless of space and time. So I'm going to think that something that is a priori will be always in the same way and the same, it will have the same truth regardless of if it happens here in Mexico City or it happens in China, or if it happens here in now in 2018 and it happens in the future, that is 2036. It is going to be necessary, meaning that it is not contingent nor not accidental, meaning that it will always happen. And it's going to be true by definition. This kind of knowledge or this kind of judgment, for Kant, it is also analytic. It is analytic because the predicate is included in the subject, meaning with this that it is true by definition. I will provide a couple of examples later on. So after this, he says that there are a posteriori knowledges or a posteriori judgments. These are acquired by experience. They are going to be particular, contingent, and perceived by senses. They will rely on what we see in order to see if something is correct or incorrect. And they are going to be regarded as synthetic because the predicate is not included in the subject. They are going to be ampliative. And I'm going to keep on following on now with more specific ideas on these judgments. So something that is a priori, an a priori judgment, as we saw, predicate is implicit in the subject. And I'm going to give you now an example. When I say triangle, a triangle necessarily has three angles. When I say something like this, it is a priori because I do not need experience to know that a triangle like this one that you are looking over here has three angles. Every triangle that I see in space and time are going to have three angles. Actually, this is truth and will never change. So try to think about other definitions that are a priori. When I say roses are roses, it's something that is a priori. I'm not giving you any extra information. If I say Sasha is Sasha, I'm giving you something that is tautological. It is necessarily truth when I say that something is something in the same way and in the same sense. This is quite logical. Actually, it's following what Aristotle would say on his three principles on logical reasoning. Okay, so what happens with a priori judgments is that they don't give us further information on the object. When I say a triangle has three angles, I'm saying a truth, but it is a pretty boring truth. Okay, now let's keep on going with the opposite to a priori knowledge. It is a posteriori knowledge. A posteriori knowledge is the one that you acquire by experience. In this kind of knowledge, the predicate is not implicit in the subject, meaning with this that there is no identity between subject and predicate. And a posteriori knowledge is going to provide further information on the object. However, this information is contingent. So I'm going to use this object as an example right now. What you can see over here, it is a maraca or sonaja. I don't know how to say this in English. So you could see it, and if I say a maraca is a maraca or a sonaja is a sonaja, I'm not saying something new. But when I say that this sounds beautifully and I start moving it like this, you may realize that I am giving you extra information. Or if I tell you what it's made of, it is made of wood and it's made of seeds and stones with inside it. I'm giving you extra information that you cannot know from the simple concept of maraca. So it what it's an a posteriori knowledge, the truth of it statement depends on experience. So when I say, for instance, over here the jacket is blue, or the maraca is made of it is made of wood, or if I say this toy is black, okay, I am all in these cases I'm giving you extra information on the I'm giving you extra information on the phenomena that is being presented to you. Okay, so far with this, Kant is following mainly what Hume was saying. Hume, remember that we were talking about matters of fact and relation of ideas. Relation of ideas is quite similar to the a priori knowledge, and matters of fact are quite similar to a posteriori knowledge. What Kant is going to do is to make to go one step further and provide a knowledge that is going to be synthetic, and it's going to be also a priori, meaning with this a priori is before knowledge, and synthetic that is going to be giving me more information on the object that is going to be ampliative, but at the same time is going to be necessary and it's going to be universal. I'm going to explain that in the next slide. So the synthetic a priori for Kant, it's a judgment in which the predicate is not implicit in the subject. They amplify the information in the object, they are going to be universal, and they are going to be necessary. The fact that it is a priori means that they cannot be in a different way. They are going to be always the same way. And the value of the truth is independent of experience. However, they are going to relate to objects of experience. So I'm going to give you now a couple of examples of a synthetic a priori. Kant says, for instance, that the fact that I say the straight line is the shortest distance between 2 points, that it is a universal truth. It is necessary for it to happen. It will always happen regardless of space and time, and it is giving me extra information on the concept straight line. As you can see over here, we have an a priori knowledge, something that is universal, that is necessary, is not something that is susceptible of change, but it is also giving me extra information. When I say straight line, I am not including immediately that it is the shortest distance between 2 points. This being the shortest distance between 2 points is something, it's an addition of knowledge. Same thing will happen, for instance, if I tell you that the inner sum of the angles of a triangle will always equal 180 degrees. When I say triangle, the a priori knowledge is that a triangle has three angles, or that a triangle has three sides. But when I say triangle, that is not including that the inner sum of its angles will lead to 180 degrees. That is something that I acquire later on experience, but it is independent of the experience that I do. Every particular triangle that I am going to measure is going to follow that in that particular law. So what Kant is saying over here with the synthetic a priori is that the synthetic a priori are going to be judges that allow us to create particular ways of understanding knowledge. With the synthetic a priori, what Kant is going to do is to get to this mixture between empiricist and criticism, and empiricism and rationalism, and say that these both ways of approaching to knowledge need to be mixed in order to be able to construct particular knowledge that is acquirable and that has proofs and that it has progress and that it is more scientific. Okay, hope this has been clear for all of you. So now let's keep on going with the synthetic a priori. What Kant is going to do with the synthetic a priori is to propound the categories of the faculty of understanding. He would say that these synthetic a priori judgments are going to be the categories that would allow us to know anything in this world. He says, for instance, that if we do not have these categories, there is not possible knowledge. So what he would say is that there are these 16 categories, or 12 categories that we need to understand. He says everything that we're going to be knowing, we either can quantify it, we can check the quality it has, we can check the relation it is with different objects, and we can check its modality. For each one of these four categories, there are three main distinctions. For instance, in quantity, everything is either going to be unity or a totality or a plurality. So either it is one or all or many or some of them. In quality, maybe it is real, maybe it is not real, or maybe there is a limitation for it. In relationship, or in relation from one to another, they may have a causal relationship. There may be two things that are correlated, or something that is inherent to it, something that is a property of it. Okay. In modality, the knowledge that I may have, it may be necessary, it may be contingent, that it can happen or not, or it may be a possible knowledge. What he's doing over here, and I don't want you to get confused with all these ideas. Mainly, it's for us to know the consequence of the synthetic a priori that we're studying. What he says is that synthetic a priori are going to lead to the categories of pure understanding, and the categories of pure understanding are conditions without which there cannot be any possible knowledge. What Kant is saying over here is that if we do not have these categories of understanding, no knowledge is possible. So he's getting to some particular points that are going to be universal and are going to be necessary, but they are related to experience. And with this, for instance, he's going further than what Kant, what Descartes would say. For instance, Descartes would get just the possibility of saying that I exist, but he never says, Descartes, that I exist in one particular way, and he never says that we have particular ways of knowing. That he would say at the end that we have these innate ideas. Yes, as you remember in previous classes, what he would say on the other hand is that knowledge is constantly changing. That there are no absolute truths. So what Kant is saying over here is that neither one nor the other are correct. That we can have absolute knowledge, that it is not innate, it's not provided by a god, but it is also at the same time linked to experience, and it is giving experience the possibility to happen. So I would like you to see how he's mixing all these elements into providing a whole new theory. As good as this may sound on the way of constructing knowledge, Kant is somehow limited. Okay, so Kant, for instance, has a couple of unsolved quests, and there are these are some of the questions and the critiques that are presented to Kant, that is the father of criticism. For instance, he says that while making this critique to the construction of knowledge, he's going to propound a subject that is making the critic, but the subject is never criticized itself. So now let's make this more clear. So let's imagine that I have here subject number one, okay? This is my Darth Vader phone case. And my Darth Vader phone case is wondering or wants to question how is his existence, or how is this existence possible? So this Darth Vader case is going to think about itself as another being. So it's thinking that this other thing over here, my Darth Vader toy, is the reality. This Darth Vader case is going to analyze it, and is going to see through it, and it's going to realize that it has a lightsaber, and the lightsaber can move, okay? And it's going to question whether it can move in one particular way or in the other. And is this my case is going to be able to question all about this Darth Vader moving this lightsaber. However, my Darth Vader case is never being questioned. There is nothing questioning my Darth Vader case. So this is something that is like a petition of principle, that this subject is never criticized. This subject is criticizing this other reality, but the reality of this other one is never being criticized. That is one of the main questions that is presented to Kant. And the other question that is presented to Kant is that he is unable to solve three really difficult and complex ideas. He says that there are three things that we as humanity can never be fully sure of. And these three things are the origin of the world, the origin of human existence, and the concept of freedom. He says that we are always going to be trying to find an answer for these three, but we are never going to be able to fully know any of these three. What he's saying, or what he's stating over here, is an antinomy. An antinomy is a process of thought, or it's a concept that allows us to think that there are as valid reasons on one hand to say that there is an origin of the world, and as there are many reasons on the other hand to say that there is no origin of the world. He, for instance, in his critique of pure reason, he's going to defend both cases, the possibility of having one origin of the world and the possibility for the world to have ever existed and not having an origin. And he provides really, really good arguments on both. And he says, at the end, we are not able to solve the antinomy. So these are the limits that Kant is going to be facing. So with this, we're getting now to the final point on Immanuel Kant. As you may have seen, it is a bit complex theoretical and epistemological theory on how to construct knowledge. But at least what we know with Kant is that, first, the object is not there for me to discover it. In the movement of knowledge, where there is a subject and there is an object, both of them are in a relation in a some sort of codependent relationship, because the subject over here trying to understand the object needs to know also about itself as an object itself. So they need to correlate somehow. That's the first thing. Second thing, that there is no such thing as a distinction between empirical and rational knowledge, that these both need to be mixed together so that we can construct knowledge in this world. And finally, that there are some things that knowledge can never be sure of, as the antinomous and as metaphysical knowledge. Hope this video has been good for you. Now I am going to lead you to it and let you to it. Please, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. That's it for today. Enjoy your weekend.